There are some interesting things around that parable which I think say a lot about the dignity of the human person and lead us to a deeper understanding of it. Firstly, Jesus makes himself the criteria for action. So when you have done this, or when you have failed to do this to the least of these, you have done it or you have failed to do it to me. So you can't claim a relationship with Jesus and then say that there isn't an obligation on me to meet the needs of the hungry, the poor, the starving, the sick, the imprisoned. And when we do make those kinds of connections, we are in fact living out the relationship we have with the divine as well as our relationships with each other. So there is an obligation on us to follow through with that and to explore what those things are. Now, I know that I personally have gone through phases where I've thought to myself, well, there aren't that many starving people. You know, if only the starving would come to my front door, I'd be happy to give them a sandwich. If only the naked would come and tell me, I would give them the spare clothes. The problem with that parable is there's no getting out of jail free card. It looks at the specific need determined by the needy person. So there's no point in me saying to somebody who's hungry, I will give you a complete health checkup and send you on your way, because the criteria for their need is their hunger. Similarly, it's not resolved by giving somebody a good meal and telling them to trot on off out of the healthcare centre or the hospital, because it's their health status that we need to sort out and we need to fix. So the criteria for judgment about whether or not we are doing good is related to the need of the person to whom we are offering service. Secondly, that in that we are establishing and demonstrating our relationship both with the divine and with each other. That's a really challenging kind of parable, and it really shows how the human person has innate dignity. So fairly often in healthcare, we encounter people who are profoundly vulnerable. The obvious ones that we often draw attention to is, you know, from the beginning of life through to birth, or at the end of life, when people are particularly vulnerable. However, it doesn't matter how good, solid, rich, well-off, knowledgeable and well-credentialed you are, anybody who's had the experience of getting a health case back and the doctor going, oh dear, knows that there is an innate vulnerability. Nothing we have done or nothing we have accomplished in our lives has prepared us for that kind of response from somebody who is looking at our healthcare needs. And so we become vulnerable. And one of the things about relationality that we need to recognise is that we are all vulnerable. All people are. And we live in such a precarious time that human life is precarious. And again, we tend to focus at the beginning and end of life. But I think as recent events around the world have shown us, you know, you can be catching a plane and the plane crashes unexpectedly, though, you know, in recent events, deliberately. And there's nothing you can do about that. And yet, you know, we have that kind of relationship with other people, which doesn't mask our vulnerability. In fact, to really live out our dignity, it's about embracing our vulnerability and allowing others to be embraced in their vulnerability. That's one of the messages that Jesus brings us, so that, you know, we feel very comfortable with the idea that Jesus is the Son of God. He's very powerful. We like the imagery, for, say, from John's Gospel. Did you not think I could call on 12 legions of angels to protect me from these people? That's an imagery that we get very comfortable with because we don't have to pay too much attention to it. The reality is the God of Jesus Christ is one who was crucified, who was taken out, stripped naked, beaten, tortured, and suffered death in the most vulnerable of ways. And that this is the key to what power in the Christian tradition is like. This is the key to goodness. And I think, while I'm labouring that, I think it's really important to understand that that's part of the foundation of human dignity. Because unless we do, well, I think we're going to be left wondering why the code of ethics is a requirement for all of us. One of the challenges inherent in the code of ethics, and I think inherent in our understanding of the dignity of the human person, is that when you understand it relationally and when you look at the vulnerability of the people around us, you also have to recognise that in delivering care, we open ourselves to risks. That if you are a caregiver in an aged care setting or a community care setting, perhaps this is almost easier to do than in the sanitised acute care model of a hospital. But you are open to risks. You can't get to know the residents or the clients over the length of time that you do without recognising your life is fundamentally altered, not so much by your actions, but in the way the care is received, in the way that the person responds to your service and commitment to them in their vulnerability. They, what part of the demonstration of why the dignity of the person is inherent in each one of them. It's when we render service to those people, we're manifesting our belief in that dignity. We're not creating it through our actions. Again, this is an important lesson because the lessons of power would suggest that I, as a powerful person rendering service to another, create some meaning through what I do. The reality is, because of the vulnerability of each person, the requirement of service from me is a demand, an ethical demand that I am required to live out. It has nothing to do, in a sense, with the person or their dignity. That's simply a demand that's placed upon me, an obligation that comes through my recognition of their innate dignity.